Welcome to the Paul Adefarasin podcast. We revisit the Word, surface the big ideas, and give you space to reflect, pray, and act. If you'd like the full message, though, you can watch it on YouTube or listen on Spotify after this episode.
Every word you spoke this morning, it wasn't just the sound wave, it was actually a brick.
Yeah, literal building block.
Right. And the question is, are you using those bricks to build a bridge, or are you unwittingly building a wall right across your own path?
It's a heavy thought because it fundamentally changes how you view, just a simple morning conversation. Language goes from being a way to describe your surroundings to the actual raw material you use to construct them.
And that profound shift, that's the foundation of our source material for today's deep dive. We are digging into this highly detailed transcript from a Sunday service live stream.
Right, House on the Rock.
Exactly, down in Lagos, Nigeria. This is from June 21st, 2026. The sermon was delivered by Pastor Paul Adefarasin, and it's titled The Power of the Mouth and the Life That It Creates, Part 2.
And I'll tell you, it's a text that absolutely refuses to stay in the theoretical realm. It takes some of the most ancient theological concepts about creation and human purpose and, translates them into very sharp psychological realities.
Yeah, realities about human behavior. So our mission today is to distill the core spiritual truths of this message for you. We'll look at the foundational scriptures the pastor uses, but more importantly, we're pulling out the specific practical actions and habits he's calling his congregation and you to apply.
Because we are talking about real communication tools here. Tools that work whether you're navigating a tense corporate boardroom or trying to repair a relationship in your living room.
We're just trying to fix your own internal monologue, honestly. Okay, let's unpack this. The pastor isn't just suggesting we use polite manners. He's claiming words have literal world-shaping power.
Right, the foundational premise is that words are instruments for creating value and shaping destiny. But he makes this crucial distinction early on. The power of a word has absolutely nothing to do with its volume.
Oh, that's interesting. So yelling doesn't make it more powerful.
Exactly. A loud, aggressive shout isn't inherently powerful, and a quiet whisper isn't inherently weak. And it also isn't just about sounding eloquent. The real power comes from the force of belief and intent driving the words.
He actually points to the creation narrative in the book of Genesis for this, specifically using Psalm 33.6 to anchor it. The verse says that the heavens were created by the breath of God's mouth.
Yeah, the text explains it as the uncreated spoke to the uncreated, which is a pretty heavy theological concept.
It really is. So what does that actually mean in a practical context?
Well, it means conceptualizing a reality where there is currently just a void. When the text says the uncreated spoke, it's referring to the idea that the spoken word has the innate capacity to cause conception.
Like to pull a tangible reality out of nothingness.
Precisely. God didn't use physical tools to build the cosmos, right? He used language.
Yeah.
And then the sermon brings in Mark 11.23 and 24, where Jesus talks to his followers about speaking to a mountain, commanding it to be removed, and casting it into the sea.
Okay, but wait, I got to push back here. Because when a modern listener hears speak to the mountain or whatever you say, you will have, a lot of people immediately roll their eyes.
Oh, sure. Because it sounds like
a religious coat of paint on modern manifesting trends. Like, I want a luxury sports car, so I'm going to visualize it, speak it to the universe, and just wait for it to appear in my driveway.
Yeah, that is the exact trap so many people fall into. And what's fascinating here is how the pastor dismantles that completely. He establishes a very strict boundary.
Which is?
This mechanism is not about arbitrary wishing or feeding some selfish ambition. It relies entirely on a concept called alignment.
Okay, so it's not a cosmic vending machine. What are we supposed to be aligning with?
With God-given purpose.
Yeah.
The pastor argues that true, deep desire, when you're walking in spiritual alignment, is actually a form of evidence.
Evidence of what?
If you have this persistent gnawing drive to build a certain business or heal a specific community or solve a particular problem, that isn't just a random daydream. The theology dictates that this desire is proof the solution has already been prepared for you.
Oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So the desire acts like a homing beacon. You aren't conjuring a mountain to move out of your own ego. You're catching the scent of a path that's already meant for you.
Which means when you speak to the mountain, you are using your words to align your current physical reality with the blueprint that already exists. But, there's a catch.
There's always a catch.
He notes from Mark 11 that the heart must truly believe what the mouth says. If you are speaking these bold words, but your internal engine is running on doubt and fear, the mountain doesn't budge an inch.
Which brings us right to the listener's daily reality. Think about Proverbs 18.21, which is a verse the pastor leans on heavily. Death and life are in the power of the tongue.
It's so direct.
Yeah, so think about a crisis you're facing at work right now, or maybe a health battle. Are you using your words to cut clear paths through the chaos? Or are you throwing boulders into your own way by constantly verbalizing how impossible the situation is?
It forces a pretty severe audit of our daily habits, doesn't it? The sermon stresses that your life does not shape your mouth shapes your life. Yeah, so if you don't like the environment you're currently standing in, the first place to investigate is the vocabulary you've been using for the past year.
But if the words we speak outward are moving those mountains, how do we fix the source? Because I think we've all tried to just think positive, and it usually falls apart the second we're under stress.
Because you can't just slap a filter on your mouth. It doesn't work. The pastor brings in Luke 6.45 for this. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
It's like a town's water supply. If the main reservoir up in the hills is contaminated with heavy metals, it doesn't matter if you install a shiny, expensive new faucet in your kitchen sink.
No, not at all.
The moment you turn it on, toxic water is going to pour out.
That is the perfect analogy for this mechanism. The mouth is just the tap. The heart is the reservoir. And if the reservoir is full of unresolved grievance or anxiety or bitterness,
that is exactly what will spill out when you open your mouth under pressure.
right, you cannot change your external communication without fundamentally treating the water in the reservoir.
And the pastor actually gives a very specific, actionable habit for treating that water, especially when dealing with past trauma or failures. He tells the congregation they have to stop hitting replay on their pain.
He uses an incredibly catchy phrase for this.
He does. He says, don't curse it, don't nurse it, don't rehearse it, disperse it, God will reverse it.
The psychology embedded in that rhyming sequence is actually profound. To nurse it means to cuddle your grievance, keeping it warm and alive.
Yeah, petting it like a stray cat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to rehearse it is even more dangerous. Every time you rehearse the story of how you were wronged, you strengthen the neural pathways of victimhood. You are literally practicing being powerless.
So how do we actually stop rehearsing the bad stories? If a listener was just fired unfairly or betrayed by a friend, that story plays on a loop automatically in your head.
The pastor points to biblical storytelling as the antidote here. He says we need to personalize these ancient texts. Take the story of Joseph, for example.
Right, who was thrown into a literal pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely imprisoned.
The key is recognizing that the pit is not the end of the narrative. If you stop the story at the pit, well, it's just a tragedy. But Joseph eventually rules Egypt. The pastor is instructing listeners to borrow the ultimate triumph of these narratives for their own current crises.
Or like the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. The pastor says you might be standing in a professional or financial fire right now, but the fire isn't there to turn you to ash.
No, it's there to burn off the ropes tying you down.
Right. So by adopting that specific narrative framework that all things are working together for your ultimate good, you stop rehearsing the trauma and you start rehearsing the victory.
It shifts you from being a passive victim of your circumstances to an active interpreter of them.
He actually uses a brilliant, highly modern analogy for this internal communication process, too. He compares our prayer life and internal dialogue to artificial intelligence.
Oh, this was such a good point. Think about how you interact with an AI tool today. The quality of your prompt dictates the entire quality of the output.
Right. If you feed an AI a vague, complaining prompt like, why is my business failing? It will just spit out a generic, unhelpful list of market trends.
Totally. But if you input a sophisticated prompt based on deep knowledge, like, given these specific supply chain bottlenecks and this customer demographic, what are 3 pivot strategies?
Then you get a highly sophisticated, actionable solution. The pastor argues that our conversations with God and the questions we ask ourselves function the exact same way.
If you just whine about the problem, you get nothing back. You have to ask the right elevated questions to pull down the right wisdom.
It really places the responsibility squarely on the individual shoulders. You are the architect of the prompt.
You are.
Okay, so if rewriting that internal script treats the reservoir, how does that change the way we actually dispense the water? Like, how does this alter the way we speak to other people and create value in the real world?
To understand that transition, the pastor introduces a framework outlining the 4 levels of value creation. This is essentially how humans generate impact and wealth on Earth. At the lowest, most basic tier, you have implementation.
Which is essentially manual labor, doing the physical task.
Yes, it relies on muscle and time. And since both of those are finite resources, the value you can create is inherently capped. You can only work so many hours. The next level up from that is unification.
So that would be management, right? Gathering the people who do the implementation and organizing their capacities to achieve a larger goal.
Exactly. You are scaling up. But the third tier, the second highest level of value creation, is communication.
Wow, communication is that high up.
It is. This is where you begin to shape corporate culture, influence mass decisions, and alter the trajectory of human lives purely through the strategic use of words.
Okay, so what's the fourth tier? The absolute highest level.
Imagination. The ability to conceptualize a completely new reality, a new system, or a new paradigm before the vocabulary even exists to describe it.
Wait, so what is the functional difference between imagination and communication then? Why is one higher than the other?
Because imagination is the prerequisite. It is the raw, unformed blueprint in the mind. You cannot communicate what you have not first imagined.
Okay, I see.
But imagination alone just stays trapped in your head. Communication is the primary vehicle required to transport that imagination out of the mind and actually build it in the physical world.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If communication is the primary vehicle to bring our greatest ideas into reality, how do we actually master it? Because the pastor gives a deeply counterintuitive secret to being an intriguing, impactful speaker.
He really does.
He says, stop trying to be interesting and start being interested.
It completely dismantles the conventional idea of charisma. I mean, society teaches us that an intriguing person is someone who holds court, telling endless stories about their own accolades and adventures.
But the pastor rightly points out that someone who only talks about themselves becomes profoundly disinteresting very quickly.
Because they just want to impress you. They're essentially using you as a mirror for their own ego.
Exactly. Whereas a master communicator focuses on impacting the listener, and you can only impact someone if you actually understand their deep, unarticulated needs. Your content has to be drawn from their hunger, not your desire to sound smart.
And he actually gives a piece of practical homework for this.
Oh, right, the 10 questions. He challenges the listeners to sit down and write out 10 genuine questions to ask their spouse, a friend, or a colleague. Questions designed solely to show deep, focused interest in the other person's reality.
It's a great exercise. Try that this week and watch how it completely alters the dynamic of the room. People are starved to be understood.
They really are, because asking a genuine question proves you value them. And to illustrate this, the pastor provides this stunning analysis of the biblical story of the woman caught in adultery.
Oh, this is a powerful moment in the sermon. The mob mentality in that scene is terrifying. The religious leaders drag this woman into the open, throw her in front of Jesus, and quote, the law demanding she be stoned to death.
Right, they are trying to trap him. If he says let her go, he breaks the law. If he says stone her, he loses his message of mercy.
And in the face of this intense verbal assault, Jesus doesn't shout over them. He doesn't argue the theology. He ignores the trap entirely, stoops down, and begins writing in the sand with his finger.
The pastor highlights a crucial principle here, right? When the environment won't allow you to use your mouth, you can use your pen. Writing is still an incredibly potent form of communication.
It is. He lets the suffocating silence do the heavy lifting there, forcing the mob to sit with their own hypocrisy. Then he finally stands up and delivers the masterstroke. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone.
And the crowd slowly drops their rocks and disperses, but it's the private conversation afterward that the pastor really zeroes in on.
Because it comes down to his use of punctuation.
Yeah, Jesus looks at the woman and says, neither do I condemn you. And then, the pastor notes, he places a comma, go and sin no more.
That comma contains the entire philosophy of being interested, rather than just being right. He didn't just point out her failure and walk away. He prioritized her trajectory over her history.
The comma signifies that the interaction wasn't about punishing what she got wrong. It was about investing in getting her life right moving forward.
Which is the ultimate goal of communication, transformation.
Okay, so we've moved from the deep theology of speaking to mountains, to cleaning the internal reservoir, to the philosophy of being interested in others. The pastor culminates all of this into a very practical, structured toolkit for communicators.
Yes, and he breaks it down into 2 lists. The 5 I's and the 4 P's.
Let's examine the 5 I's first. These are the mandatory imperatives for anyone who wants to command a room, whether it's a pulpit or a pitch meeting. First is inspiration.
But he defines it uniquely. It's finding the intersection between what the audience desperately needs and the solution you have to offer.
Got it. Second is intriguing, which we just covered, right? Being fascinated by the audience rather than trying to be fascinating yourself.
Exactly. Third is invitational.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
This requires making the communication feel like a dialogue, even if you are the only one holding a microphone. If you are speaking to 500 people, it should feel like a one-on-one fireside chat.
So you have to read the room's body language, feel the tension or the boredom, and adjust in real time.
Yeah, you're conversing with them, not broadcasting at them.
Which is much harder than it sounds. Fourth is informational. You cannot survive on charm alone. You have to actually know your subject matter inside and out. You must be a relentless student of your field.
Which leads directly to the fifth I, which is inputs. Because the quality of your output is entirely dependent on the quality of your inputs.
Makes sense. And to categorize those necessary inputs, he introduces the 4 Ps. A master communicator builds their message using principles which explain the invisible mechanics of how a concept works.
They use pictures, which provide a visual language to make abstract ideas concrete.
They use parables, which are the narratives. As we saw with the Joseph story, humans are hardwired for narrative. We remember the principle because we remember the story.
And finally, proof. You need empirical data, testimonials, or lived experiences that demonstrate the concept actually works in the real world.
The pastor summarized this entire preparation process with a quote from his own mentor, and it's something I think every listener should write on a sticky note. The formula is, read yourself full, think yourself clear, pray yourself hot.
It is a phenomenal progression. Read yourself full is the data gathering phase. You consume the principles, pictures, and proof.
But if you stop there, you just step into a meeting and regurgitate a chaotic list of facts. That's just verbal indigestion.
And nobody wants to sit through a data dump.
Right.
Which is why the second phase is vital. Think yourself clear. You must sit with the raw data, synthesize it, and build a simple, coherent architecture in your mind. You refine the complexity into clarity.
And the final phase, pray yourself hot. That translates to finding your absolute conviction right. By the time you open your mouth, you should be so deeply passionate about the solution you are offering that you lose all self-consciousness.
Exactly. You aren't worried about how your hair looks or if you sound impressive. You are consumed by the mission of delivering the value.
And just in case anyone thinks this framework only applies behind a stained glass window, the pastor shared a massive piece of proof during the sermon. He talked about a woman in his congregation who took these exact principles, cleaning her internal script, being deeply interested in the client's needs, and structuring her inputs, and walked into the boardroom of a top-tier national financial institution.
The result was staggering. The CEO of the institution was literally high-fiving her during the presentation.
That's wild.
She completely captivated a room full of high-level executives, not through manipulation or aggressive sales tactics, but because her communication was resonant, built on clear architecture, and designed to create real value.
It is undeniable proof that these spiritual laws of communication translate flawlessly into the secular marketplace. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with the realization that words are not just descriptions. They are the architectural bricks of our reality. We learned that to change what we build, we have to clean the reservoir of our hearts, refusing to nurse or rehearse our past traumas.
We explored the 4 levels of value creation and discovered that the secret to mastering communication is a genuine, profound interest in the transformation of others.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it leaves the listener with a weighty sense of responsibility. The environment you are operating in right now, your career, your relationships, your stress levels, was largely constructed by the words you and the people you allowed to influence you spoke over the last few years.
But the incredible beauty of this mechanism is that tomorrow is entirely pliable. The future is waiting to be built by the vocabulary you choose to adopt starting today.
So what does this all mean for your next 24 hours? How do you actually implement this when the alarm goes off tomorrow?
It requires an intense, almost hourly vigilance over the tongue. But as we established, the tongue is just the tap. The real work is an unrelenting vigilance over the heart.
Exactly. And that leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. The pastor made it abundantly clear that the mouth simply speaks from the overflow of the heart. Think about how much daily energy you burn trying to filter what comes out of your mouth.
Oh, so much energy.
Right. You bite your tongue in meetings, you force a polite smile when you're frustrated, you try desperately not to snap at your family after a long commute. It's exhausting. But what would happen if you took that exact same amount of energy and applied it to fiercely guarding what you allow into your heart in the first place?
If you ruthlessly curate your inputs, the media you scroll through, the cynical conversations you entertain, the bitterness you've been nursing, the output takes care of itself.
You wouldn't have to fake being positive in that meeting if your internal reservoir was actually full of hope and clear strategy. The filtering wouldn't be necessary. Go back to that image we started with. Your words are the bricks building your future, which makes you the master architect. Take a hard look at the blueprints you are drawing up with your conversations today and ask yourself, is this the house I actually want to live in tomorrow?
Thank you for listening. To go deeper, watch the full message on YouTube or listen to the full-length sermon on Spotify. Follow the podcast, and please share it with someone who needs it and leave your response in the Q&A. Kindly keep your heart on fire, your eyes on Jesus, knowing you are the exception. Grace and peace. We love you deeply.